なあレック、そろそろ取りに行こうか、ワンピース。
You never get a second chance to make a first impression. It's probably a saying you've heard at least once in your life. A strong first impression can form a strong memorable moment, and this holds true in storytelling as well. Even though the story of One Piece starts with the legend of Roger and introduces the main protagonist Luffy, I'm sure for a lot of people their first impression of the story was formed by none other than Red Hair Shanks, a happy-go-lucky pirate who can quickly become serious when his friends and loved ones are in harm's way. Shanks is the pirate Luffy was inspired by and models himself after, and we see this inspiration play out throughout Luffy's journey. Once upon a time, Shanks was that ambitious kid just like Luffy, and now he stands as one of the 4 emperors of the sea. So we'll be covering his journey from a cabin boy on the Pirate King's crew to the great pirate he has become, in order to find out whether or not his strength lives up to the hype. But before we delve into it though, be sure to smash the like button and subscribe to the channel if you enjoy content like this, and as always, your support is much appreciated. Shanks' journey as a pirate literally started from day 1, as he was found in a treasure chest by the Roger Pirates. He grew up to become the apprentice of the Roger Pirates and has seen his fair share of battles at a young age. Despite being on the Pirate King crew, Shanks missed out on an opportunity to see the Phantom Island Laugh-Tale as he stayed behind to look after Buggy, who suffered a fever. Shanks was okay with this and expressed his desire to one day travel to Laugh-Tale with his own ship. However, skipping ahead to Roger's execution, Shanks told Buggy that he was no longer interested in going to Laugh-Tale at the time. This disappointed Buggy as he believed that Shanks had the potential to become the next king. Buggy also said that Roger wished for Shanks to follow in his footsteps, which makes sense considering Roger passed down the straw hat to him just like how Shanks passed it down to Luffy. However, this would all change in the current day as Shanks has now declared his objective to claim the One Piece. I personally believe that this change of heart has something to do with Luffy awakening his fruit and becoming Joy Boy, but we don't really know, and even Buggy has no clue why Shanks changed his mind. Fast forward later into Shanks' pirate career, he engaged in daily duels with none other than Mihawk. We don't know when exactly this took place, but we know it was before Shanks lost his arm 12 years ago. These duels were regarded as stuff of legend, and their memory remained fresh to Whitebeard even after a decade had passed. The narrative of their duels was that they were the 2 strongest swordsmen at the time, stronger than a 56-year-old Big Mom and a 66-year-old Rayleigh who was potentially still in his prime. It's also stated in Mihawk's Vivacard entry that they competed ruthlessly over their swordsmanship skills. As far as we know, these 2 were practically equals at the time, and for whatever reason, Shanks had the goal of demonstrating his superior swordsmanship. I know this may sound like it's leading into a Mihawk vs Shanks segment, but just bear with me as Shanks' ties to Mihawk are a big part of his journey. All things would change though when Shanks sacrificed his dominant left arm to save Luffy, and due to this, Mihawk was no longer interested in their duels. When someone loses a limb, they naturally become weaker than before. Examples of this in the series are Redfoot Zeff, who essentially ended his life as a pirate when he ate his own leg. It's made very clear that Zeff was much weaker than before due to this, and he even says himself that it'd be the end of Redfoot Zeff before cutting his leg. Another example of this is Kiros, who also cuts off his leg, and is mentioned multiple times how impressive he is despite having one leg. Diamante even says an ordinary man would have been immobilized after all the running Kiros did that day, and Kiros makes sure to clarify that he won't use his one leg as an excuse. Even though Shanks lost an arm instead of a leg, it still sets a precedent that losing a limb makes one weaker. However, Databook Red has a section covering Shanks, and on the opening page it states that even with one arm, their power remains undiminished. Some may translate this line to his power remains undiminished instead, which at face value would suggest that Shanks didn't get any weaker from a combat standpoint despite the loss of his dominant arm. However, the wording of this statement is more nuanced, as the word power here, or Seryuku, is a broad term for power, which can encompass not only individual strength, but also influential power. Not only that, but Seryuku is often used to refer to collective strength or influence rather than an individual. So even though the sentence can be translated to only refer to Shanks, it's probably more appropriate to be collective power given the following sentence. The next line states that the red-haired pirates are a great pirate crew whose name resounds throughout the world. So when you read both sentences, the undiminished power is referring to the influential power of the red-haired pirates despite their captain losing his dominant arm. This interpretation is the most consistent, as there's another statement from Databook Red that states that Shanks was once on par with the world's strongest swordsman, which confirms there was a decline since his dueling days. The passage records the moment of Shanks using Conqueror's Haki to scare the Lord of the Coast, so it's fair to say that this statement is referring to a version of Shanks after losing his arm at the time. Physical strength has always been a key component to one's strength as a swordsman, and a good example of this would be Zoro vs Zombie Ryuma, who were equally as destructive because they were physically as strong as one another. Hypothetically, if Zoro lost an arm prior to this fight and fought Zombie Ryuma, he would be at a clear disadvantage, as he's no longer on par with him physically. Even if we put all this aside and just stop and think for a moment, Shanks giving up his dominant arm to save Luffy wouldn't be much of a sacrifice if he didn't actually lose anything of actual value. Some may put into question how strong Shanks was at the time of his duels with Mihawk, as he'd yet to become an emperor until 6 years later. Not only was the narrative of the duels propping Shanks as one of the 2 strongest swordsmen at the time, but Databook Red confirms that Shanks was considered to be a great pirate and the red-haired pirates were a great pirate crew even 12 years ago. Only a handful of pirates are considered to be great pirates, such as Roger and Shiki in their heyday and all of the emperors. It's essentially the highest caliber of pirate you can be before becoming the king, which requires top tier levels of strength. It's also narratively consistent with chapter 1, as Shanks tells Luffy to return the Straw Hat once he becomes a great pirate, and it wouldn't make much sense for him to set the bar for Luffy to become what he isn't even considered to be yet. However, despite me saying Shanks declined from his dueling days once he lost an arm, that isn't to suggest that his current day self is weaker than he was in chapter 1. Of course, Shanks would have to get acclimated to using his right arm and become a proficient swordsman with his least dominant hand. I can imagine this happening within the 6 years until he became an emperor, as he expanded his territory and notoriety. We don't know what Shanks did to become an emperor, but considering Whitebeard hadn't heard Shanks' name in a long time, with the only major thing he records being the duels with Mihawk, suggests it wasn't super eventful, or at the very least it wasn't as eventful as the legendary duels. Either way, that 6-year period would essentially be Shanks returning back to form, as at the very least he became as strong as he once was during his dueling days. In the current day, Shanks' skill is still strong enough that it demonstrates and puts into perspective the caliber of the world's strongest swordsman. However, despite returning to form, the loss of an arm probably stunted Shanks' potential that could have potentially reached Roger's level, which makes the sacrifice for Luffy truly meaningful. The first time Shanks would make a major move since becoming an emperor was when he decided to visit Whitebeard to discuss matters concerning Blackbeard and Ace. Beckman warned Shanks that the government wouldn't stay quiet about this, but Shanks didn't care and was prepared for battle. The Gorosei were wary of Shanks' actions just from Rockstar's message to Whitebeard alone, as the threat of 2 emperors meeting is something the government desperately tries to prevent. Despite mainly being an onlooker on the seas that takes action in order to bring balance to the world, the Gorosei acknowledge that he can cause a lot of damage. In fact, it's stated in the Road to Laughter booklet that the Gorosei consider Shanks to be uncontrollable if he was let loose. That isn't to say that Shanks and the red-haired pirates could solo the world government, as they weren't even the strongest pirate crew at the time, but obviously they are a big threat. Eventually, Shanks would visit Whitebeard and the red-haired pirates had to take down a marine fleet in order to get there. As he boarded Whitebeard's ship, he used Conqueror's Haki in full effect to knock out the weaker members of the crew. What Shanks did here is explain the Databook Blue Deep as elevating one's spirit to release one's Haki in all directions. This is the most advanced usage of the basic level of Conqueror's Haki, and it's highlighted as the Haki of a Yonko. After the discussion between the 2 emperors became sour, Whitebeard and Shanks clashed their blades, which split the sky, showcasing advanced Conqueror's Haki for the first time in the series. It's stated in Shanks' Vivicard entry that he eventually grew into a figure capable of standing on equal terms with Whitebeard, which refers to Shanks' rise into becoming an emperor. Some may try to be nasty with this and argue this means Shanks is as strong as prime Whitebeard, which is ridiculous, but this clearly is referring to Shanks reaching the caliber of an emperor, which is the same level as Whitebeard, which Garp also says when introducing and explaining the Yonko to the Straw Hats. Anyways, Shanks' next move was just before the Marineford War when he intercepted Kaido, who was targeting Whitebeard. Kaido and Shanks were reported to have a skirmish. However, it seemed as though it wasn't too serious considering the red-haired pirates arrived at Marineford shortly after this with no signs of injuries. Some may argue that Shanks actually beat Kaido during this skirmish as one of Kaido's 7 defeats. However, we know this isn't true as Kaido claims no one in the world can beat him, which would be contradictory if Shanks had already beaten him. It's also contrary to Kaido's narrative as he was anticipating Joy Boy as the one to ultimately defeat him, and as we know, that isn't Shanks. However, Kaido does still hold Shanks in very high regard as he considers Shanks among the very few who could truly fight him alongside kings of their era and Kazuki Oden. These 5 were also representations of Luffy's potential as Kaido questioned how high his ceiling can go, which further praises Shanks' strength. Whether or not you think Shanks is stronger than Kaido is neither here nor there, but I have covered this in a separate video if that interests you. Once Shanks arrived at Marineford, he was capable of intercepting Akainu and blocking his attack, which saved Kobe's life. This moment is actually highlighted in the databook and credits Shanks for being powerful despite only having 1 arm. Shanks was willing to fight against Navy HQ, the Warlords and the Blackbeard Pirates if they were not willing to end the war right then and there. However, since the Navy and the Blackbeard Pirates had accomplished their respective missions, they agreed to end the war, with the Blackbeard noting that it was too early to fight Shanks at the time. That's not to say the red-haired pirates could actually threaten them, as even the Whitebeard Pirates, who were stated to be the strongest pirate crew at the time, weren't capable of defeating the Marines. It still portrays Shanks and the red-haired pirates as a respectable force to be reckoned with. After Blackbeard became the user of both the Darkness and Earthquake fruit, he went on a power high as he felt like he could do whatever he wanted to the world and claimed to be the strongest in the world. Even when facing both Garp and Sengoku, Blackbeard feared nothing and was confident in his ability to sink Marineford. Blackbeard tends to become overconfident and was definitely punching way above his weight here, but the fact that Shanks was able to snap him out of his power high and humble him is very telling, which is likely due to their history. Shanks doesn't take any major action again until the final saga, but he continues gathering intel on Blackbeard and trying to keep up with his movements. At this time, the Kid Pirates ran into the red-hair pirate fleet who was staying at Elbaf. Before Kid could destroy the red-hair affiliates, Shanks blitzed him and defeated Kid with his divine departure. Some may argue that Kid was caught off guard, however Shanks literally approached him from the same ships Kid was targeting. Before Shanks swooped in for the save, he was able to foresee up to 10 seconds in the future, as that's how long Kid said it would take to wipe out the affiliates. Shanks being able to see 10 seconds into the future with his observation haki is a clear advantage he will have against most people. However, this might not be that crazy if the likes of Katakuri were able to see similar distances in the future, for instance when Pudding fell to the ground during the wedding. This might come across as low-key Katakuri slander to some of you, but considering Luffy's future sight grew to match Katakuri's by the end of their fight, it doesn't make that 10-second feat from Shanks super impressive compared to other future sight users. Shanks being able to one-shot Kid makes his divine departure stronger than literally any attack Kid and Law was hit by during the raid of Onigashima. I say Law because he's comparable to Kid, who was able to endure Kaido's Thunder Bagua, which scales the divine departure significantly above this technique, albeit Kaido was suppressed at this time. Not only that, but Killer was also one-shot by the divine departure as well, as he tried to protect Kid, which only makes Shanks all the more impressive. If it hasn't been made clear already, Shanks really is built different. He can use all 3 types of haki all at the advanced level, and the advanced level of Conqueror's haki can only be wielded by a handful of the very strongest. In fact, Shanks' Conqueror's haki is so powerful that he was able to momentarily stun Admiral Greenbull. Conqueror's haki, as really described it, is the power to overwhelm others, and the only way to protect oneself from a Conqueror's blast is by having strong enough willpower to resist it. Oda further explains in the SPS that Conqueror's haki can knock out an opponent if there's an overwhelming gap in power. Greenbull wasn't knocked out by Shanks' Conqueror's haki, however he was clearly affected to some extent. Greenbull was forced into deforming from his tree-looking form, he screamed and was shown rattling. This just goes to show that Shanks didn't hold back either, as he lost control, affecting the weak ones on his crew despite the target only being Greenbull. Not only that, but given the strength of the opponent and the fact that Shanks was mad at what Green Bull was doing, it makes sense that he wouldn't hold back in order to suppress him. However, you can argue Shanks was only as effective as he was due to Green Bull being caught off guard, as Jozu highlighted that you can't maintain consciousness in Shanks' presence unless you're fully prepared for it. So Green Bull likely wouldn't be as affected or affected at all if he knew Shanks was about to blast him with his Haki. I left this for the end, but Shanks also has another Haki ability that allows him to kill others' observation Haki. This was confirmed by Oda's notes in the film Red Magazine, however we're yet to see this ability used on panel as of this recording. My headcanon is that Shanks uses his Conqueror's Haki to disrupt his opponent's focus and calmness in order to kill their observation Haki momentarily, as we know that being calm is integral to using observation Haki. Like I said, this is just my headcanon, so only time will tell on how this works and how effective it will be against top tiers. As you all know, freedom is a major theme in One Piece, and for Luffy, the Pirate King is the man who is the freest on the sea. Even though we don't exactly know what being the freest man looks like, it's stated in Shanks' Vivicard entry that if that's how we define the Pirate King, Shanks would undoubtedly be the closest to the throne. Anyways, that's all to know about red hair Shanks at the moment. So does he live up to the hype? Is he currently the strongest man alive? Or is he just a Mihawk victim? As he is. With that said though, be sure to smash the like button and subscribe to the channel if you enjoyed. I've been the one and only Zage, and until next time.